The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect the policies and the position of Now You Know.
Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. Together with experts and newsmakers, we make sense of the week's biggest issues and stories. I'm Barnaby Lo in tonight's conversation.
Kill them all, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte said on March 5th, referring to members of the Communist New People's Army. 2 days later, 9 activists were killed and 6 arrested in simultaneous police operations in southern Luzon. Human rights groups have dubbed it Bloody Sunday. The United Nations described the killings as arbitrary, but authorities maintain their men acted above board, with deaths occurring only because they had to defend themselves. It was the usual Nanaban narrative. Relatives of those killed and witnesses refute this. They also deny those killed were armed combatants. Justice Secretary Minardo Guevara has ordered the Interagency Task Force on Extrajudicial Killings to investigate the killings. Human rights organizations, however, urged the UN to conduct an independent probe.
All right, and joining us for this discussion this evening is the spokesperson of the Philippine National Police, Brigadier General Ildebrandi Usana. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for having me.
All right. Sir pa rin tawag sa akin ni sir. So, okay. And joining us later on the show after this interview with General Usana are the the legal counsel of the human rights group Karapatan, Attorney Taule. Sol, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good evening. Good evening po.
And the senior researcher for the Asia Division of Human Rights Watch, Carlos Conde. Good evening, Kaloy.
Hi, good evening, Barnes. Good evening to everybody, and thank you for inviting me to the show.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to you, Attorney Sol and Kaloy, and we'll start this discussion with General Usana. I think I'm coming in a little bit slow. I hope it's just the video and not my audio. Okay lang po ba? Nadidinig niyo ako, General Usana?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear,
Okay.
sir.
Kasi parang hindi sync yung video ko tsaka yung audio ko. But anyway, sir, before we get into the killings and the arrests last Sunday, I would like to ask a couple of questions about this latest development in Calbayog. I know that you've already relieved, General Eleazar has already relieved the police intelligence chief of Calbayog, Lieutenant Fernando Calabria. Siya po yung nag-submit ng letter doon po sa clerk of court sa Calbayog asking for a list of names of attorneys representing, and these are the words in the letter, representing communist terrorist group personalities in court. Pero, okay, so umaksyon na po yung PNP, nirelieve na po ni General Eleazar, pero tila po hindi pa rin panatag ang mga abogado. Meron po silang concern sa safety nila because of this. And siguro, dagdag na ito kasi ang dami na rin talagang lawyers na napatayed in the last 4 or 5 years. 56, if I'm not mistaken. 54 or 56, if I'm not mistaken. So, 2 things jump out for them dun po sa letter. One is, nakalagay po doon, this is in compliance with higher PNP offices. So, ibig sabihin po, sir, this is with the knowledge of Krame?
Well, very clear po
Very clear
yung
po
statement ng ating OIC
OIC.
ngayon, si Police Lieutenant General Guillermo NSR, at sinabi niya na hindi nag-emanate sa higher ups ng command group yung pong kautusan na ang ating mga lower units ay magkalap ng mga impormasyon na makukuha sa korte with regard to cases involving communist terrorist groups. Nakita naman ho natin, well, we give it to our OIC at nakapagbigay na nga siya ng statement. Base naman sa kanyang statement, maaring naging eager beaver yung pong officer na i-relieve nga sa kanyang position at naging honest po siya to even communicating with the court. Nakita naman natin, in writing po yun, no? Ibig sabihin, hindi po ito surreptitious act. Meanwhile, hindi pa rin ito naayon sa ating polisiya, kaya sabi po ng ating OIC, paimbestigahan po itong mga bagay nito. Meanwhile pa rin, nagkaroon po ng relief order, base na rin po sa kautasan ni OIC, and I guess itong order na po ito ay na-implement na po.
Bakit po kaya ganun yung language? Kung hindi po direct na kautusan galing sa taas, ay siguro implied policy. No? Meron po bang ganon na understanding yung mga pulis sa baba na may implied policy na hahantingin or kukunin yung mga pangalan ng everybody involved sa mga tina-target na mga sinasabi nga na communist terrorist group personalities?
Well, we'd rather give this doon sa concerned officer, no, kung saan yung sinasabi niyang naging source niya. But as far as the higher ups are concerned, wala pong kautusan na nagsasabing mangalap sila ng impormasyon direct from the court with regard to these cases, no, involving the CTGs. We'd rather leave it at that. Investigations being conducted, and I hope we will settle with the statement coming from the OIC.
Okay, but the other thing that stands out or that jumps out for the lawyers is yung pong table, meron pong attachment table, tapos nakalagay mode of neutralization. Ano kaya ibig sabihin nito?
Yung nga po yung kailangan nating mapa-determine, no? May matrix pa siya, ibig sabihin kailangan mapilapan po ito no, kinaukulan doon sa korte. We will have the lieutenant explain ano yung interpretation niya doon sa mga bawat konteksto na inilagay niya doon sa matrix na yon. More or less, maaaring isa ito sa mga kailangan explain din ng ating mga opisyal pagdating po sa mga discussions with regard to language being used by any of our police officers on the ground.
But it could mean mode of neutralization could mean arrest or
definitely po sir, because if we are talking about pending cases, that could have been referring to the arrest that may have been made by our police officers
or killing
that filed charges against these people, those accordingly belonging to the communist terrorist group. That we will check, we will validate this. We will have to see to it that the result of the investigation will eventually be shared with the public as soon as matapos po ang pagsasagawa nitong investigasyon ito.
So pero hindi niyo po masisi yung mga lawyers, General, na kung matatakot sila dahil dito, no? Because in addition to this nga, yung ang dami-dami ng lawyers na napatay. So how are you going to assure them of their safety given this context?
Yung mga datos with regard to the deaths of a number of lawyers, maring absolute naman, hindi naman po ito resulta ng kung ano man pong mga nasa kaisipan ng mga ilang sa mga progressive grupo, kinoconnect din lang ito siguro sa mga naisasagawa ng ibang mga law enforcement institutions, no? But as far as the PNP is concerned, there is nothing to worry. Dito po sa ating mga abogado, open naman po ang ating mga kapulisan. In fact, we work closely with lawyers groups, no, in the different regions, and we can say that there are efforts being done between the police and the legal communities para mabigyan pansin kung ano man po yung mga gaps between the PNP, other law enforcement institutions, and the legal community po.
Okay, one quick question on the death of Calbayog Mayor Ronaldo Aquino. So, PNP Chief General Sinas has said na hindi daw po ito ambush. At nauna raw nagpaputok yung mga tauhan ni Mayor Aquino. Do you maintain this version? Because his ally in Congress has been saying na hindi ito yung nangyari. And his son is saying na 21 gunshot wounds. How can that be na hindi ambush? 21 gunshot wounds daw po ang nasustain ni Mayor Aquino.
Nagbigay na rin po ng kautusan ng ating Chief PNP sa Regional Director ng PRO-8 sa Police Brigadier General Ronald De Jesus na mag-create ng Special Investigation Task Group. Yung naibigay na statement, una pa lang ni Chief PNP ay base sa initial report dahil yung pupunta po ang mga polis para magkaroon ng initial investigation. Nakita po nila sa dalawang panig na may mga namatay. So ang impression is there might have been shootouts between the two sides, no? Pero isa ito sa bibigyang investigasyon ng SIPG. Marami pang anggulo na dumating, maraming mga opinion, maraming mga conjectures, but all this will boil down doon po sa usapin ng mga ebidensyang makakalap ng ating mga investigador. Okay naman po na papasok din ng NBI para matignan po kung ano po yung anggulo na maaari nilang makita na makatutulong din po sa konklusyon dito po sa investigasyon sinasagawa ng ating kapulisan.
So you're saying na maaasahan natin na hindi ninyo pagtatakpan yung mga tao ninyo kung matutuklasan sa investigasyon na sila nga yung nagpaputok, unang nagpaputok kay Mayor
Totoo
Aquino.
po yun, sir. Malalaman po natin yan. We are hoping may mga witnesses po na magmamanifest na sadyang nakita nila kung ano nangyari po sa insidente ito. Doon po sa open space, if I'm not mistaken, bridge po ito, no? So most likely yan, merong mga tao na nakasaksi sa pangyayaring ito. At well, more or less may mga videos din na makapagbibigay din ng elemento doon po sa gagawin pong investigasyon ng police. All this will have to be considered by our investigators po.
Okay. So yung mong kasing impression is parang nag-conclude na si Chief PNP. So parang nape-preempt yung investigation. You're saying hindi ganun?
We have to understand meron pong mga namatay na mga polis po dito, no? Si Mayor Aquino, of course, isa po sa mga malaking tao na nakilala po doon. May mga polis po na kasama siya, meron din po doon sa kabilang side. Siguro we will leave it at that. Malaman po natin kung ano talagang nangyari doon po sa shooting incident po ito.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna go now to the so-called Bloody Sunday killings, and I'm not sure if you would agree with what they have termed this day of arrests and killings by the PNP of activists and who you allege to be NPA members of the NPA. Siguro yun siguro yung unang tanong, ano po yung basehan na para sabihin na NPA po itong lahat ng mga inaresto ninyo nung linggo at yung mga napatay po sa sinasabi ninyo na naging parang kumbaga shootout po?
If I were to share with you yung ilan sa mga ebidensya galing po sa mga kapulisan, masasabi ko po, isa dito po ay yung mga witnesses na mismong kasama nitong mga grupong ito, kasama ng mga suspects, pati na rin po siguro yung ilan po sa mga namatay, na nagtuturo po sa kanila as belonging to NPA. Ito po ang magiging basihan po, among other evidence, ng ating mga kapulisan upang maisampa rin po ang kaso laban sa kanila. We have to also understand, resulta po ito ng pagkalap ng mga impormasyon doon po sa mga mamamayan na nakakakilala din po sa mga taong ito, na posible din po sa mga ginagawa ko nila na mamatyagan po yung kanilang mga kilos. And in the process, you have to understand whether you are a communist or not. Doesn't matter as long as you are not committing any kind of crime or offenses under the law. Pero dahil po yung impormasyon na something to do with illegal possession of firearms and explosives na maaring nagagamit po sa mga violenteng pamamaraan, pananakot, at iba pang mga bagay na associated with the acts committed by the NPA members, ito po ay hindi kumbaga Isa po ito sa mga kinonsider ng ating kapulisan doon po sa pag-iimbestiga. Para masabi po na valid at merong integrity yung pong isinagawa ito, nag-apply po sila ng search warrant. Alam niyo po ang search warrant, kung titignan po natin sa batas, hindi po ito isang bagay that you can get over the counter. Ang mga judges, they would have to examine. Probing questions will have to be presented. Malalaman ho doon sa mga witnesses, mga deponents, kung yung pong mga sinasabi nila ay naayon doon sa kanilang nasaksihan. So kung sila po ay mga dating kasamahan, dating mga nakakakilala dito sa mga taong ito, I guess the judges will have to be considering all the necessary information to validate the issuance of search warrants. And that is what happened. About 41 search warrants were issued. Dito po sa Laguna, Batangas, Cavite, Rizal at NCR. Ito pong search warrants na ito po ang naging basihan ng ating kapulisan upang magsagawa ng simultaneous anti-crime and law enforcement operation or SACLEO. We have nothing to do against those people saying that they are activists. Malayo po silang magsalita kung ano man po ang sa kanilang saloobin. At marami naman tayong pagkakataon ng mga pulis at mga aktivista ay nagkakaroon ng maayos na pag-uusap bago sila magkaroon ng kanilang mga pamamaraan upang mag-demonstrate ng kanilang mga saloobin in public. But as far as crime is concerned, as far as law enforcement is concerned, we just have to perform our duties in accordance with law then. So, yung Sunday na yon, execute yung ating mga efforts by way of deploying the different teams responsible for ensuring na maipa-serve properly yung search warrants. Ano po ang requirement sa search warrants? Kailangan po merong mga barangay captains, meron po mga disinterested witnesses, meron po mga tao na nakakausapin somewhere nearby doon sa areas where the serving of search warrants will have to be done. Along with that, meron din po kaming pinadala ng mga ambulances, kung sakali mang merong mga resistance, may isa katuparan na pagkakaroon ng ambulansya, may atid agad sa ospital kung kinakailangan. And that is what happened doon po sa mga nagkaroon ng unlawful aggression, no? Yung nag-resist. Alam naman ho natin itong mga NPA, they were in possession of firearms, mga high power that is, assault rifle included, and explosives as well. So we
General, you're saying that the cops who were involved in these operations, they followed all protocols. Pero nauwi pa rin po sa napakaraming namatay na mga, according to you, members of the NPA, but according to them, unarmed activists. Paano po nangyari na these are separate instances, by the way, hindi naman siya isang operasyon lang sa isang lugar. So paano nangyari na napakaraming nag-end up na may namatay? And I will just, sir, if you may, I will just cite to you some media reports at mga sinabi ng mga kamag-anak at saka yung mga alleged witnesses. So, for example, in the case of Ariel and Chay Evangelista, and this is in Batangas, sabi po ng mga kamag-anak, paano daw po manlalaban, pinosasa na raw po. Okay, that's one. And in the case of Puroy de la Cruz, who is a dumagat from Tanay, ang sabi naman ng mga kamag-anak, paano nanlaban kapag tiningnan mo yung mga bullet holes sa bahay, sa isang side lang ng bahay, meron mga bullet holes. So these are just a couple of examples from recent media reports.
Yan po ang ilan sa mga iimbestigahan po ng Internal Affairs Service. Motu proprio, because deaths happen, there will be investigation. And this is one of the mechanisms in law enforcement. When deaths happen, there will be investigation internally. This is part of the mandate of the Internal Affairs Service. And good enough that there will be the effort coming from the DOJ himself. The Secretary of DOJ also mentioned about deploying a number of investigators from the NBI maybe, and also under the AO35 to look into the veracity of the operations kasi meron pong mga namatay. We actually are welcoming any and all pieces of evidence to the contrary. But insofar as our police officers are concerned, nandun po yung kanilang mga reports, nandun po yung mga ebidensya, nagsampa na rin po sila ng mga kaso laban dun po sa mga suspects. And I guess meron naman po siguro tayong mga bagay considering na itong mga CIDG personnel na silang nauna, alam po nila yung mga implications ng mga batas at pati na rin po yung the likelihood na kung sakali mag-violate sila, meron po silang kakaharapin na sanctions under our existing law po. We will not condone any acts that are inimical to the operations of our police officers, but rest assured na maging objective din po ang mga pagpapahayag ng sinuman na sinasabing ito ay massacre, ito ay isang bagay na nagbabiolate sa karapatang pantao. Ang mga police, aral po sila sa mga ganyang bagay. For a number of times, they have been engaged in a number of operations. Lahat po ng kailangan protocols na matutunan nila ay sinusunod po nila. May briefing, merong human rights element na bago sila mag-operate, alam nila yung human rights component. And of course, we cannot, huwag naman po nating isipin na ang mga polis kailangan bang mamatay sa mga ganitong bagay para mapatunayan na merong operations na nangyari. Siguro naman po dahil trained naman po sila sa mga ganyang bagay, meron naman po silang kakayahan upang maiwasan na sila po ay under the principle of self-preservation, makaiwas sa posibleng maging kamatayan din po nila no, sa ganitong operation. But then again, we are hoping yung mga witnesses, yung mga nakakita, yung pamilya ng biktima, ng itong suspect na namatay po doon, ay isa sa mga kukunan din ng statement ng Internal Affairs Service. And rest assured na sila po ay bibigyan ng pansin ng ating Philippine National Police.
But wouldn't you say, sir, na fair game naman po yung mga criticism, mga doubts, tsaka concerns because in light of the recent review of the Department of Justice on the conduct of drug war of the Philippine National Police, wherein the review, based on the cases that they reviewed, mostly in Bulacan, if I'm not mistaken, ay hindi daw po sumunod sa protocol ang mga police. Kumbaga, there is negligence on the part of the police. Kaya ang nangyayari, hindi nagiging malinaw ngayon kung paano namatay yung mga drug suspects na namatay. Kumbaga, sabi lang nanlaban. But it stops there. So, kaya meron pong doubt at concern, sir.
Well,
And
we're talking about
this extends now to the killings of activists. Yeah.
We're talking about the initial findings ng DOJ. Merong review panel po dyan, no? Kasama din po ang PNP doon po sa review panel na yon. At lumalabas nga doon po sa out of 5,000 or so na bilang ng mga cases, mga 300 pa lang po ang nabigyan nilang pansin. And they already have mentioned about some of possible implications na mga violations and all that. And insofar as the PNP is concerned, we hope that we could get some of the facts arising from these findings of the DOJ. Kung sakali man po na mag-iimbestiga po ang further ang DOJ, kasi we wouldn't want to say na lahat ng mga operations na yan in violation of the existing law ng ating mga kapulisan dahil meron naman po tayo yung tinatawag na presumption of regularity. Otherwise, yung ating mga kapulisan hindi na po magtatrabaho kung every now and then pagdududahan namin ang work nila. Kailangan din po ng mga mamaya, may mga pulis tayo nagtatrabaho para sa kanilang kapakanan. So in this case, if we are to talk about the fight against illegal drugs, meron po talagang maaring maging basihan para masabi natin na may mga hindi konforme sa maayos na pag-aresto. And if you're talking about arrest, that is only representative of less than 2% of the entire number of arrests made by the police, yung pong may mga namatay. Ibig sabihin, bakit mas maraming mga naaresto kaysa doon sa kiniklaim ng marami na may mga namatay? Bagamat hindi naman po natin sinasabi na itong mga police will just go scot-free, no? kailangan pagdusahan po nila yung mga kaso kung sila yung mapapatunayan na may ginawang hindi maganda. Pero kailangan pa rin po natin kunin yung mga witnesses, yung mga pagpapatunay na talaga sila ay gumawa ng hindi naayon sa batas. Kasi mas marami po kasing mga naresto ang mga pulis kaysa doon po sa bilang ng mga namatay. At take note, meron po tayong mga pulis din na mga namatay din. Mga pulis na isinugal din ang buhay para lang masuportahan din ang mga mamayan laban sa illegal na droga. So yun po yung balance na dapat natin i-create. Hindi natin sinasabi na perfect yung ating operation, but meron din tayong justice system. And I guess ang ating mga pulis, meron din po silang karapatang pantao para ma-explain din po nila ang side nila. Kung sakaling bibigyan sila ng day in court.
Yeah, I understand, sir, what you're saying about presumption of regularity, but what I'm hearing from you also is that you're not discounting cases na pwedeng nagkamali yung mga pulis or meron hindi sinunod, meron hindi ginawang tama. We're talking about the drug war, but would you say na this would maybe could also possibly apply dito sa mga nangyayari ngayon sa mga aktivista at if we were to, listen to what the police is saying, mga members ng New People's Army?
Everything is possible, sir. Lahat po ng mga bagay we can accommodate so long as it's geared towards having a just, fair, and of course, we hope na itong pangyayaring ito ay magdudulot ng mas maayos na direksyon para sa ating hustisyang hinahanap sa mga taong na kinaukulan. Of course, as far as the PNP is concerned, that is our mission. We need to serve and protect our people. Even at the risk of the lives of our own police officers, they have to perform the duties and responsibilities. Hindi man ito magiging acceptable sa ilan sa mga mamayan because every time they operate, alam nila na magdudulot na naman ito ng akusasyon sa sinuman. At nandun po tayo para bigyan pansin yung ating mission. Pero kung sakaling mang may mga pulis na nag-violate ng ilan sa mga procedures natin, bukod sa IAS, nandiyan po ang DOJ, nandiyan po ang NBI, nandiyan po ang CHR upang bigyan pansin itong mga bagay nito. Pero hayaan din natin na magpatuloy yung trabaho ng ating mga pulis para mabigyan pansin yung pangangailangan ng mga mamayan. Kasi ang PNP po is a law enforcement institution. It's not an easy task. It's quite difficult, lalo na sa complexities ng ating society. At doon naman po sa mga manliligalig, hinikayat naman po natin na sana'y sumurrender na lang po sila, manumbalik para sa maayos at mapayapang pamayanan at magtutulog-tulungan na lang po tayo para sa kabutihan ng ating bayan. Ang pulis ay kaibigan naman po ng lahat, pero pagdating po sa mga manliligalig, mga bagay na gumagawa ng hindi maganda sa ating mga mamayan, nag-extort, nananakot, and all, palagay ko naman, hindi po rin naman natin papayagan ang mga ganitong bagay na mangyari po sa pamayanan natin.
Balik lang po ako, sir, dun sa search warrant. Kanina po, you were talking about how this is all above board kasi po, kumuha kayo ng search warrant and hindi naman po ganun kadali ang kumuha ng search warrant. Pero meron pong mga accusation na meron pong warrant factory. Kumbaga, iilan lang daw po yung mga executive judges na nag-grant nitong mga search warrant na ito at meron daw pong pattern na sa mga search warrant na ito, ang nakalagay lang, may isang hand grenade, usually. Pagkatapos daw po, pag nakuha na yung search warrant, usually po, madaling araw daw po kinoconduct yung search. And then, in the case, for example, yung sa Cavite po, si Kamani, the search warrant was for his home in Rosario, Cavite. Pero sa Dasmariñas, Cavite po, sinerve sa kanya yung search warrant. So, kumbaga, medyo may irregularity daw po.
Doon po sa usapin na search warrant factory, siguro, well, I could not speak for the courts po, no? Pero masyadong sweeping po yun kung sakaling masabi na ang pag-issue ng search warrant resulta ng isang faktorya para sa mga ganyang bagay. This may also be a slap to our justice system. Hindi na po ba tayo nagtitiwala sa hustisya? We have to understand, meron din po mga instances na kahit isinagawa ng police or ng NBI, at the end of the day, pag ang korte sinabing hindi ito naayon sa kanilang appreciation, dinidismiss din naman po ang kaso tapos magbibigay ng pahayag. Yung mga progresibong grupo, nandito na yon, may mga hustisya pa rin na nangyayari. Palagi ko naman it will be unfair to the courts para akusahan ng ganyan. Doon naman po sa sinasabing may mga lugar na supposedly isa-serve yung warrant pero hindi po pala nangyari ito. This is part of the investigation and we hope we can welcome everyone. We hope na kung sakaling mang magkaroon ng mga ebidensya magpapatunay na talagang nag-violate ang ilan sa mga pulisan, sisiguraduhin po natin justice will be served dito po sa mga pamilya ng mga namatay po.
Okay, we will remember your word on that, sir. But just real quick, just I know you na-explain niyo na po ito no. Pero ano po ba talaga yung siguro for our audience na hindi medyo nasubaybayan, ano po ba talaga nangyari doon sa punerarya na sinasabi nila na ayaw daw ibigay yung 4 na katawan doon sa mga kamag-anak nila? In the end, binigay pero it took a day or so para ma-release yung mga katawan.
Well,
Version niyo po.
If I were to consider yung information from the provincial director ng Rizal, nasa punerarya po kasi ang control with regard doon sa disposition kung sino man po ang papasok doon sa kanilang premises. Yung usapin po kasi ng pag-aayos ng bangkay, napag-usapan po ito ng local government at ng PNP, yung lokalidad, yung local police. At dito po sa pagsasagawang ito, minabuti po ng local government na maging disente at maayos yung pagkakaroon ng yung kabaong, yung mga assistance necessary, kasi ito naman din binibigay ng local government. Doon po sa kamag-anak o pamilya. Ito pong Karapatan ay nag-create ng scene. They wanted to get in as well, pasamahan yung pamilya. Siyempre, yung owner ng punerarya, hindi naman ho sila papapasukin talaga doon. Dahil una, meron po tayong mga violations, commit pag sila po ay naghimasok doon sa loob ng private compound at pwede ho silang sampahan ng kaso ng owner dito pong puneraryang ito. At hindi naman ito siguro kalakihan para sila ay lahat doon ay i-accommodate, meron pa tayong pandemic, baka ito ay magdulot din lang ng problema para doon sa punerarya at isarado po sila because of that. At siyempre na doon po yung pulis para makatulong din po sana doon sa pamilya, doon sa kamag-anak, pero dahil nga ayaw naman din silang ibigay ng karapatan, dahil nga yung scene na gusto nilang isipin ay lalong pinahihirapan daw itong kamag-anak. Palagay ko naman ang
nandun po yung mga media, sinasabi po ng mga report, yung mga kamag-anak ang nagreklamo.
We have to put this into context. Palagay ko nagkausap natin yung lawyers nitong mga kamag-anak. Palagay ko naman yung mga ganyang bagay, hindi naman po masyadong mahirap. Ano namang mahihitan ng polis kung sakali man yung bagay ay nandun pa. We just have to see to it na maayos ang pagbibigay ng respeto doon po sa bangkay. Kaya nandun po yung local government at sila po din ang magsasabi, nag-aabot sila ng tulong sa local government pero pinaiiwasan ng karapatan. To make it appear na sadya daw pong binibiktima lalo itong mga kamag-anak. That will be unfair. We might as well listen also to the local government ng Antipolo. Nandun po sila upang magbigay ng pahayag tungkol po sa pangyayari po. And we do not also discount the possibility baka yung owner ng punerarya ay magsampa din ng kaso laban sa mga miyembro ng karapatan kasi nagkaroon ho sila ng scandalous situation doon, kinakalampag ho nila yung mga gate, it might even cause some damages doon sa property. Hindi po natin alam, but the point po natin dyan is there are people there who are also affected. At ang ginawa ng karapatan ay nag-create po ng scene po doon.
All right, we'll leave it there. We're running over time, but I have just one last question. Kumusta na po si Chief PNP General De Bolsinas? He was confirmed to be COVID positive a couple of days ago. And in relation to that, idudugtong ko na rin po sa tanong yung criticism po na hindi daw po sumunod sa COVID-19 protocols itong si General Sinas because nagpa-test siya, but he was all over. He was in Mindoro and he was in events in Crame and he was at the Manila Cathedral last Sunday.
Well, we can say, I can myself say na among all government officials, the GPNP has been the most compliant with regard to minimum health and safety protocols. Every time he moves, he will ask the PNP General Hospital to have him undergo the swab test. Ang ibig pong sabihin, kahit ano pang mga ginagawa niya, pag lumabas po siya ng Krame, and even within Camp Krame, meron po siyang panuntunan pagdating po sa mga ganyang protocols po, particularly yung swab test. But, well, of course, that requires also all other officials na kasama niya po, no? Down to the lowest ranking police officer. Yung mga bagay na ginagawa po ni Chief PNP for more than a year, hindi po siya nagkasakit. Ngayon lang po siya talaga na hawa dito sa virus pong ito. Hindi naman po siya talagang grabe at this point. Siya ay asymptomatic. He's still in Kiyangan Hall, doon po sa quarantine facility namin inside Camp Crame. And he's okay. He's in high spirit. Pero yung sinasabing hindi po siya nag-comply, he took the chopper direct doon sa regional headquarters ng Mimaropa ng police. At he didn't want na magkaroon pa ng mga welcome treat para sa kanya. And there were several, a number of provincial government officials who were there as well. So I guess it would be unfair na hindi po siya dumaan. Araw-araw na ginawa ng Diyos, siya po ang nagbibigay sa lahat ng mga police officers ng panuntunan pagdating po sa compliance ng minimum health and safety protocols. So we give it to him po, sir.
Well, we're glad to hear na he's okay and he's asymptomatic. Pero with all due respect, sir, I think a lot of people will disagree that he's been the most compliant. Last year, yung pong issue ng Manyanita, I think you will remember that. Hindi pa po kayo spokesperson ng time na yun, I think, no? But that's etched in the minds of everyone. But the bigger question here is, kasi kung ako po, for example, ako po na-expose na po ako sa COVID a couple of times, and every time I got tested, while waiting for the result of the test, I would isolate myself. I would lock myself up in a room in my house. So, in my understanding is, yung po yung protocol dapat. So, kung nagpa-test po si Chief PNP ng March 6, ng March if I'm not mistaken, March 6, March 9, March 11, hindi po ba dapat naka-isolate siya all those days na naghihintay siya ng result?
Well, for a number of times, negative po siya. Countless times, in fact. Maybe you could find this in the records of the PNP General Hospital. The countless times that he had this swab test. But on the last particular swab test that he had, he was already in Mindoro when he was already notified by his doctor that he was found positive asymptomatic. So he went back to Camp Crame after that. He didn't stay that long. He was supposed to be brought direct to Palawan via choppers from Mindoro. His intention actually was to visit the preparation for the plebiscite. In other words, he is a working man. And he didn't bother probably that whoever was he meeting with, maaaring meron doon po dyan na mga nagkaroon ng positive na pala without him knowing it. But a virus is everywhere. We have to understand even the royal families get infected with the virus. So wala pong exempted dyan sa usapin ng virus. Kahit even sabi nga po theoretically, kahit na vaccinate na po kayo, most likely yan mahawaan pa rin kayo ng virus. So, yung ating Chief PNP, hindi naman po siya Superman, hindi naman po siya isang tao na very exceptional. Nahawaan din po siya, although asymptomatic, and they're just hoping, they're praying na siya makarecover fast.
Okay. I think we'll have to leave it there. I think we are in agreement na hindi po siya Superman. And we are in agreement na we are both, I think, both glad that he's okay and he is asymptomatic. Thank you very much, General Ildebrandi Usana, for accommodating our request tonight. Thank you for being on our show. Now we have to move on to our next set of guests. Attorney Sol Taule, legal counsel of Karapatan, and the senior researcher of the Asia Division of Human Rights Watch, Carlos Conde. Kaloy, Attorney Sol, good evening again.
Good evening, Barnes, and good evening, Kaloy. Hello.
Hindi ko alam kung saan ako magsisimula sa reaction ninyo.
Ang dami kong nadinig. Sumakit yung ulo ko.
Sandali. Siguro Sol.
O sige, go.
Simula tayo dun sa, I'm not sure, pina-autopsy ninyo, independent autopsy, yung mga victims.
Yes.
Sa PGH. Meron na bang update? Yes.
Wala pang results, nag-aantay pa kami, pero all of the victims ay na-autopsy na sila. So, inaantay pa namin yung initial result ng autopsy ni Dr. Fortune.
What do you expect to come out of this independent autopsy?
Well, yung totoong nangyari, no? Kasi ang pinapalabas sa narrative ng PNP, lalo na yung mga umoperate sa Calabarzon, yun nga, yung overuse ng laban, tokhang style operations kasi itong ginawa. So makikita naman siguro dun sa mga bullet wounds, sa gunshots, kung totoo ba, di ba, nanlaban, lalo na yung spouses evangelista sa Batangas, at itong mga dumagat. At lalo na si Kamani sa Cavite na talagang niratrat ng bala. So hopefully malaman natin kung ano yung nag-transpire based doon sa initial results ng autopsy.
So obviously, you don't buy this nanlaban narrative. And this question goes out to both you and Kaloy.
Well, ako talagang 101% sure ako. Hindi ako naniniwala at all sa pinagsasabi, with all due respect, na meron akong natitira for the PNP at lalo na sa mga kunento kanina ni Police Brigadier General Usana. Si Kaloy, hindi ko alam. Naniniwala ka ba, Kaloy?
Sa totoo lang, medyo nahihirapan akong paniwalaan lahat ng sinasabi ng PNP tungkol sa nangyari ng linggo. Hindi lang dahil sa yung lantarang discrepancy nung nangyari nila, no? Pero yun na nga, I think importante yung autopsy na ginagawa ni Dr. Fortune sa mga katawan ng mga biktima. Mahalaga yon para matukoy talaga kung paano namatay. Pero mahalaga din dapat na iimbestigahan at tingnan ng maayos yung eksena ng mga kung saan nangyari yung karahasan. Kasi doon matutukoy mo rin kung talagang nanlaban. Ano nga, kinuwento nga kanina na yung sabi mo, Barnes, na yung mga bala na tagos-tagos hindi tawag dito, hindi consistent dun sa sinasabing nanlaban. Kasi kung talagang may firefight na nangyari at malalaman yan. So I don't know, hindi ko alam kung meron bang ginagawang pag-iimbestiga talaga dun sa crime scene. Kasi importante din yun, ano? Tsaka, I think ang pinakamabigat ng dahilan kung bakit nahihirapan akong paniwalaan ng PNP tungkol sa nangyari is that masama na ang record nila sa mga ganito . Hindi lang sa usapin ng mga aktivista pinapatay. In fact, kanina nga sinasabi ni General Usana yun na yung pinapalabas niya na kung papakinggan mo siya para napaka-benign at napaka-harmless ng PNP. Kaya napaka-effective niya as a spokesman . Pero kung titingnan mo yung record nila sa itong mga napakarami ng mga instances, lalo na sa drug war, talagang masasabi mo na napakatalamak yung pag-violate sa protocol, pag-violate sa SOPs ng PNP tungkol sa mga raids na ganito, tungkol sa pagkuha ng search warrant, tungkol sa conduct ng raids. So, ang dami-daming dapat tingnan, ang dami-dami dapat imbestigahan. At ito ang lagi natin sinasabi na dapat tinitingnan at iniimbestigahan ng mga independent bodies, hindi lang ng PNP, hindi ng IAS. Sa totoo lang, at with all due respect to the IAS and HRO, Human Rights Office ng PNP, walang kwenta ang mga yan pagdating sa usapin ng extrajudicial killing. Kasi hindi sila nag-iimbestiga ng masusi sa mga extrajudicial killing.
Kasi, kaparo nila.
kabaro nila, andun na 'yon. Tsaka yung mandato nila naiiba talaga. Ang Human Rights Office ang nakatutok sila sa mga misdemeanor sa mga PNP, yung mga may mga kabit, yung mga hindi nagbibigay ng mga maayos na pasahod, yung mga nambugbog na mga standby. Mga ganun yung mga tipong mga iniimbestiga nila. Kaya napapansin mo ang HRO hindi yan nagbibigay ng mga datos ukol sa mga extrajudicial killings na lalo sa drug war. The same with the IAS. Now, hindi naman natin nila lahat. May mga ginagawa naman yung mga yan ng mga trabaho. Kaya lang, pagdating sa drug war, pagdating sa extrajudicial killings ng mga aktivista, pretty much walang kwenta ang ginagawa ng IAS tsaka Human Rights Office.
Attorney Sol, may independent investigation ang CHR, tama ba? Wala yata yung audio ni...
Ay, sorry, yes, oo. Merong
Yes.
independent investigation.
Oo. Meron bang mga... Kasi yung mga napanood ko, mga media reports, I think is findings ng CHR, tama ba? Yung mga minention ko kanina na yung mga bullet holes dun sa bahay nila, I forgot yung mga dumagat, Puroy de la Cruz.
Yes, Puroy de la Cruz, yes.
Tapos yung nagsabi na naka-handcuff daw, yung si Ariel Evangelista. Those are from the CHR investigation or those are from the Karapatan investigation?
Also from Karapatan din kasi may quick reaction team kaming pinadala doon sa site ng pangyayari and also doon sa mga naaresto nung Sunday, nung mismong event na yun, nung pangyayari na yun. So, nakakuha kami ng mga testimonies from the witnesses at saka doon sa mga nahuli mismo, saka doon sa pamilya ng mga namatay na inconsistent yun sa sinasabi kanina ni Police Brigadier General Usana. Napakadaming irregularities. Actually, as a handling lawyer ng mga ganitong klaseng kaso, alam na alam ko yung modus na ginagawa dito from the application ng mga search warrants hanggang sa execution. Hanggang sa paano nila ino-operate yung mga targets nila ng mga aktivista.
When you say modus, may pattern?
May
Pare-pareho
pattern
yung
talaga. Oo.
in every case?
Pare-pareho. Actually, pare-pareho.
Okay.
Kung
Can you
titingnan
walk us
mo,
through?
oo, kasi kung itong application ng mga search warrants na to, essentially dapat yan kinukuha mo kung saan yung place na i-raid mo. Okay? So kung magre-raid ka sa Bacolod, dapat sa Bacolod. Pero dahil nga merong circular na pinalabas na kapag ka mga matataas na krimen, like illegal possession of firearms and explosives or murder or mas mataas pa, pwedeng i-apply yung search warrant sa executive or vice executive judges ng Manila and Quezon City. So nagagamit nila yung batas na yon para doon only mag-apply ng mga search warrants dito sa QC at saka sa Manila. Lahat, karamihan halos ng mga sinerve na search warrants nung March 7 ay kinuha dyan sa Quezon City at saka sa Manila actually. Sa Manila Executive Judge and Vice Executive Judge. No? Yung in-execute dyan sa Rizal at saka sa Cavite at saka dito sa Laguna. Tapos yung manner din ng execution, gabing-gabi, lagi yan. Actually, kahit hindi lang dito sa March 7 incident, yung mga nakaraan pang incident, laging wee hours, no, kapag kagat ng dilim kung kailan tulog na yung mga tao at walang witnesses. Yung service din yan, yung paraan ng pag-execute yung search warrant, sa totoo lang, wala naman silang witnesses kasi yung mismong under sa batas, kailangan yung mismong occupant ng bahay, masaksihan nila yung paghahalughog. Pero dito kasi talagang caught by surprise yung mga may-ari, tatadyakan yung pintuan, papadapain yung may-ari ng bahay at papalabasin yung mga kasamahan. So may first number of policemen, mga 5 or 6 people, na papasok without the presence of anyone, kahit barangay, saka sila mabilis na magtatanim and then lalabas sila. Saka nila tatawagan yung barangay para sabihin, ay, dito pa lang po kami magsisimula. When in fact, nakapasok na sila and they are armed. No? Doon din sa mga testimony na kuha namin sa mga victims ng arrests dito sa Laguna, sinabi din na hindi sila nag-introduce ng sarili nila. In fact, yung iba hindi pinakitaan ng search warrant, di ba? So paano mo masasabing, kaya nakakainis yung marinig kanina na sinasabi ni Police Brigadier General Usana, yung pinipilit niyang presumption of regularity ng police operation. Sawang-sawa na kaming marinig yan Parati nilang ini-invoke yan, na it's as if presumption of regularity of police operations is higher than presumption of innocence. Yan lagi ang pinatatablan nila sa mga kliyente namin. Sinuhusgahan agad nila, tinataniman pa nga nila ng firearms and explosives. And sinong mga tinataniman nila ng firearms and explosives? Mga dumagat? Do they have the capacity to buy firearms or explosives? Si Nanay Nim Palansanas na 61 years old na lola, na mayroong granada at M16.
Yung planting of explosive na sinasabi mo is also part of the pattern in all
Yes,
cases?
in all cases.
Pero,
Including
there's no possibility na meron talagang, I mean, because the case that they are pursuing is possession of firearms. So,
alam mo Barnes, kaya kasi illegal possession of firearms and explosives ang usual na kinakaso sa mga aktivista because it's easy to concoct evidence. Sino ba ang may granada at saka may baril? Sila naman kukuha lang sila sa mga kampo nila ng granada at at firearms at itatanim nila. Pangalawa, non-bailable offense ito. Pangatlo, there is no other witnesses. There are no other witnesses to the circumstance kundi sila lang. 'Di ba? So it's just the word. Kung wala kang CCTV, walang ibang ebidensya. It's just the word of the victim versus the words of the policeman. So ganun ang labanan dito.
Actually, may pang-apat.
Oo.
Okay.
May pang-apat. May track record na ang police na magtanim ng mga ebidensya.
True. 'Di ba? Alam natin yan.
Pa lang, na-document ng Human Rights Watch at ang iba pang mga NGO, yung pattern na pagpa-plant nila ng evidence, baril, drugs sa mga suspects. Yung sa research, for instance, ng Human Rights Watch noong 2016, 2017, may mga cases kami nakita na nakausap namin, for instance, mga witnesses na ando, nakita nila mismo. Unang tingin nila sa bangkay na nakahandusedo nung una, kinulang pa nga nila ng picture, walang baril. Tapos nalingatan sila ng konti or nilingat sila ng polis, pag kamukat-mukat mo, meron ng baril sa tabi ng bangkay. And hindi mo pwedeng sabing isolated case ito kasi nung kamakailan lang may lumabas na report about this cop na pinapaputok niya yung baril niya pagkatapos nilagay doon sa bangkay ng napatay sa drug raid. So I mean, there's a pattern, there's a modus operandi that's been happening. And in fact, nakita natin dito sa drug war, and now it's clear even in the campaign against activists na yung pag-violate ng protocols, yung pag-violate ng procedures ng SOP, ang mga police, yun ang SOP, yung pag-violate nila. Sa drug war raids pa lang, antindi na ng mga violation ng procedures na ginagawa ng police. Yung bigla-bigla na lang papasok at pati mga bata na mga witnesses ay ibinabalibag na lang, tinatakot. Napaka-talamak yung mga klaseng ganyang
So you're saying, Kaloy, pareho yung sa drug war. Saka
definitely.
Yeah.
Yan ang nakikita namin dito, na yung method sa drug war ay ginagamit nila ngayon na hindi lang ito usapin ng pag-i-invoke nila ng non-laban na narrative. Actually, yung non-laban narrative, tawag dito, gas-gas na yan, noon pa yan, even before Duterte, ginagamit na ng mga pulis yan. Alam mo yung mga laging nahuhuli ng mga, even before Duterte, yung mga rapist, for instance, na hinuhuli ng pulis tapos nasa loob ng sasakyan ng pulis, bigla na lang napatay at inakusahan kasi inagaw niya raw yung baril. I mean, this gas-gas na modus na to ng pulis na ngayon, talagang todo-todo ang paggamit nila dito, hindi lang sa drug war, pati na rin sa mga dito sa mga aktivista.
Siguro dagdag ko lang din, Barnes. Kasi binabanggit din ni Usana kanina na sa lahat ng sinabi niya dito lang ako nag-agree. In theory, mahirap talagang kumuha ng mga search warrant sa korte. Kasi kailangan mo mag-present ang mga witnesses mo Kaso, sa totoong buhay, hindi yan ang nangyayari. What the PNP is doing, humahanap sila ng mga paid and fake witnesses nila saying na they know that these activists are involved in gun running. Na kung makikita mo yung mga affidavits ng mga witnesses na to, magtataka ka, are these real people? Totoo ba na na-examine to ng judge? Because the names are like as common as Juan de la Cruz. Tapos walang naka-attach na ID dun sa kanilang mga affidavit. And ang pinakamalala, they've never been presented in court dun sa mga actual na kinasuhan nila. So for example, in the case of Reyna Maynacino, search warrant na inisyu ni Judge Villavert, may binibintang sila na involved sa gun running si Ram Carlo Bautista, one of the co-accused of Reyna Maynacino. Pero they did not present for once itong confidential informant na to. So sino ito? Totoo bang tao ito? Totoo ba yung mga kinikwento nito? At paano niya nasabi yon? So wala kaming chance to know. Ano ba, saan nyo napulot itong mga witnesses na ito? So clearly, siguro again, itong gas-gas din na word na with all due respect din sa mga huwes natin, alam ko naman na tao lang din sila, no? They are also subjected to harassment and threats. Pero napakadali namang sabihin na sila din probably ay nati-threaten or nahaharas ng authorities to issue these search warrants. So in short, nawaweaponize itong mga korte para mag-issue sila ng search warrant na pare-pareho halos yung mga laman at hindi man lang ba nila pinoprove ng maigi kung sinong mga background ng mga tao na to. And in fact, yung mga search warrants na na-issue last year ni Judge Villabert have been dismissed by the co-equal courts of Mandaluyong and Negros. So malaking patunay yun na these search warrants are talaga, bogus talaga na nakuha.
So are you saying that what General Usana said was half true? Na okay, meron nga silang witness kasi sabi niya it's a requirement to get the search
Probably,
warrants.
yes.
Pero you're saying that these are fake witnesses.
Fake witnesses or may question ako kung nag-i-exist ba talaga sila? O baka present lang nila yung affidavit pero hindi naman nila pinakita talaga sa
Kasi
US.
sinabi ni General Usana na hindi naman daw tanga tong mga judges na kumbaga to issue a search warrant, they have to probe. They have to ask these
Correct.
probing questions. You're saying that they did not.
Oo. Hindi sila tanga, pero tao lang sila. Pwede silang ma-threaten. No, last year, bago magkaroon ng massive raid sa Negros tsaka sa Manila, we've seen General de Bolsinas talking to the executive judge of Quezon City. And then the following day, nagkaroon ng massive operation sa Negros tsaka sa Manila. So possible yan yung mga ganyang klase ng ginagawa ng PNP. Sila ang may machinery, sila ang may resources under the command of President Duterte mismo na kill, hindi ba? Napakadali lang mangharas ng mga huwes kung ganyan ang utos mismo ay nanggaling sa mismong presidente ng Pilipinas. Hindi yan imposibleng mangyari.
Yeah, let's go there, Kaloy. Because March 5th, sinabi ni President Duterte, kill them all. Disregard, not in those words, but disregard human rights. And then March 7th, we see 9 activists getting killed in separate simultaneous police operations and 6 activists getting arrested.
Yeah.
Would you make that connection between these police operations that turned out deadly and the pronouncement of President Duterte March 5th? And going all the way back, this rhetoric it's not the first time naman na nagsabi siya na, kill them all,
That's true.
Even when he was starting his presidency, yan yung sinasabi niya. And then we see people getting killed. So, it's safe to make the connection?
Oh, definitely. It's more than safe to make the connection. If you look at if you read his pronouncements 2 days before the attacks, the killings on Sunday, I mean, pwede mo nga sabihin na parang kinokopya lang ni Duterte yung sarili niya. I mean, this is the exact same words that he was saying at the start of the drug war, and then bloodshed happened immediately. So, I mean, can you argue that his words directly contributed to the violence last Sunday? I mean, you'd have to be pretty, I would say, clueless to not think na hindi na embolden yung kapulisan dito. And then you also have to be pretty clueless to not think that this is all part of a larger policy. This is I was gonna use the word stupid, pero masyadong harsh, but clearly from the very beginning, this is part of a larger policy of the counterinsurgency policy ng gobyerno. And this is, kung napapansin niyo, tahimik na tahimik sa nangyari nung Sunday. Medyo tahimik dito ang militar, ang NTF LCAP. But they're behind this. They're one of my suspicions bakit hindi sila masyadong maingay dito is because takot sila kasi makikitaan sila ng butas, makikitaan sila ng tawag dito ng problema ng mga sumusuporta sa AFP, for instance ng US or ng Australia or nitong mga bansang to. Kasi ang sa police medyo kumbaga yung behavior or conduct ng police during the drug war parang tipong established na talagang napaka lupit ng drug war. Itong military nung panahon ni Duterte at lalo ng drug war medyo malayo sila dito medyo hindi sila masyadong tinatamaan sa issue ng human rights pagdating sa drug war. And I think meron silang, suspecha ko lang naman to, na meron silang ano ngayon na tendency ngayon na parang ayaw nilang makulapulan sila itong mga nangyari nung Sunday. Pero again, titingnan mo to, this is a big part of a big policy ng gobyerno as far as counterinsurgency is concerned. Kasama dyan yung NTF-ELCAC, ito ngayon kasama dito yung PNP, no? And when you really think about it, Barnes, the PNP is the best agency right now of the government to prosecute or to carry out this mission. Kasi I mean, you know, they've demonstrated that they're willing to do whatever it takes to follow Duterte's orders.
Yun bang review ng DOJ of the conduct of the PNP in the drug war, is that damning for you?
Well,
I guess, yeah.
Well, you know, you can look at it, many ways, in both ways. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that the only reason why the DOJ said this, and for Secretary Guevara to say that they're going to investigate all of this, is because they're under pressure from the UN Human Rights Council, and they have been trying to, to say things that they think the UN Human Rights Council will like to hear, and this is exactly one of those. Kaya window dressing ang tingin namin dito sa review panel na ginawa ng DOJ. And in fact, kailan pa nila in-announce itong review panel na to? This was last year pa. Hanggang ngayon, hindi pa umaarangkada ito ng todo. Sabi nga ni General Usana kanina, sa 5,000 kaso ng mga patayang nangyari nung under the drug war, 300 pa lang yung na-review ng DOJ. So, and even then, it took a while for the reports of the DOJ to come out. And now, papichi-pichi pa, at talagang makikita mo parang they're dragging their feet. They're not very, I don't think there's an honest to goodness attempt to really do the most important thing right now, which is to exact accountability.
Pero Attorney Sol, at the very least, is it itong DOJ review, is it a vindication of what you, human rights lawyers and activists, have been saying all along?
Oh, alam mo, public knowledge naman yan Sila na lang di nakakaalam o dinedeny nila. Pero at least, 'di ba? Yun nga nagkaroon ng affirmation kahit alam na nga ng lahat. Pero syempre, yung mga ganyan kasing bagay madalas nauuwi sa investigation. Pero tuloy pa rin yung mga ganyang gawain kasi ang lakas ng loob ng mga kapulisan, no? Kahit nasabi natin may ganyang result yung mga investigation na yan, ang lakas pa rin ng loob dahil walang napaparusahan. They get away with it with full impunity dahil sinasagot sila ng yung policy galing sa bibig mismo ni President Duterte and it cascades down to the PO1 or SPO1. Kaya ganyan ka-barbaric yung mga acts nung mga kapulisan natin. So, ako talagang bukod dyan sa investigation na yan, na long overdue na yan ika nga, dapat talaga may managot dito sa mga gantong klaseng krimen.
Do you fear? Yes, Kaloy. Yeah.
Dagdag ko lang dyan sa investigation, no? Minsan pakinggan itong mga
masakit na sa tenga, no?
Oo, itong nasa mga poder na lagi sinasabi na iimbestigahan namin yan, ganito, iimbestigahan namin yan. But the fact is that 2016 pa itong mga patay na to sa drug war, for instance. Ilan na ba ang na-imbestiga nila? Ilan na ba ang na-convict sa korte? Isa pa lang sa mga police na. Isa pa lang ang nasa, out of the libo-libong kaso ng mga patayan na involve ang police, isa pa lang ang nahatulan sa korte. At kung titingnan mo yung record ng DOJ, and in this regard, ang DOJ hindi masyadong forthcoming about yung mga statistics nila. Pero ilang dosena lang ang may active investigation. So, madaling masabihin na mag-iimbestiga. Mas mahirap patunayan na yung pag-iimbestiga mo ay nag-result into something, an administration of justice. Yun ang key doon yung impunity. Paano putulin yan? Yung accountability, paano makuha yan?
And how do you feel about the UN's actions over the years? Last year, or was it the year before? I think it was last year when they condemned, when they came out with a report and said there is evidence of planting of evidence and so on and so forth. Things, sabi ni Attorney Sol, alam na nga natin, sila na lang di nakakaalam. And the UN came out with this report, pero they did not decide on conducting an independent investigation here. So a question to both of you, is the UN doing enough?
Ako siguro syempre nung medyo nakaka-disappoint 'no, kasi papaimbestigahan mo dun sa mismong mga taong nagsasabuatan na gumawa ng mga krimen na ganito, hindi ba? So anong mapapala nating impartial investigation? So siguro sobra-sobra na yung nangyayari ngayon. It's high time for the UN. Well, welcoming naman yung statement nilang nung UN Human Rights Office nung kamakailan lang kaugnay dito sa Bloody Sunday killings and arrests. Pero it's high time na magkaroon talaga ng independent investigation yung UN sa nangyayari sa Pilipinas. Kasi ilan pa ba ang kailangan mapatay para mapatunayan natin na the domestic remedies have failed us. The Supreme Court, so many writ of amparos that we filed in that court, walang nangyari. Marami nang pinatay, marami nang nakulong. Saan pa kami magre-resort? Ano pa ang dapat naming gawin? So the system have failed us, and I think it's time for the UN to step up na ngayon.
Yeah.
Pero paano kaya, Carol? I mean, how, when the government itself is stonewalling, not welcoming these independent investigators, and then they're saying na, well, gumagalaw naman kami, and then they show this DOJ review, they're basically criticizing the police.
Yeah. Well, before I go into that, Barnes, let me cite you two things about the UN. One, we need to contextualize kung ano yung dynamic ng UN Human Rights Council tsaka yung UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Magkaiba yon. Yung OHCHR, sila yung medyo critical about sa mga patay na nangyayari dito. Yung UN Human Rights Council, ito yung mga medyo nai-impluwensyahan pa ng Pilipinas. Ito sila yung Human Rights Council ang naniwala sa palusot ng gobyerno na mag-iimbestiga daw ang gobyerno. Sila yung mga naniwala sa sinasabi ng gobyerno na hindi, wag niyo kaming parusahan, kailangan namin ng technical assistance, ng capability building. Kaya medyo minsan ako personally, hindi ito position ng HRW, pero personally minsan talagang exasperated na ako sa Human Rights Council. Pero sa isang banda, hindi ako nagtataka kasi mga gobyerno din yan eh. So kung sinong aliado ni Duterte, kung sinong aliado ng Pilipinas, kung sinong aliado ng China, malakas sila dyan sa loob ng Human Rights Council. At yan in fact ang nangyari kung bakit nung nakaraang mga session, kailangan grabe yung pakikipaglaban na ginawa ng mga NGOs, hindi lang sa Pilipinas, kundi international NGOs, para ipasa yung resolution ng Iceland. Bakbakang umaatikabo yun. Kasi binablock sila, may pushback not just from the Philippines, but from all the allies of the Philippines. Now, kahit ano pa ang sabihin ng Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, kahit pa maglabas sila ng report in June 2020, naglabas na sila ng report condemning the violence in the Philippines, kung hindi sila pakikinggan ng Human Rights Council, parang walang mangyayari. Kaya dito ngayon, push ng independent investigation ang NGOs, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, and even the Office of the Human Rights High Commissioner for Human Rights.
I was just going to say, the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights had said that these killings last Sunday were arbitrary. That was their description. So, pero you're saying na it doesn't automatically mean that the UN Human Rights Council will take action.
No, it will not, because it's a very political body. It's not the UN Human Rights Council is not an NGO body. It's a government. It's a body composed of governments with all the the pressures and the realpolitik and all the horse trading that's happening in there. So medyo struggle talaga to get something out of the UN Human Rights Council.
I think Sol wants to say something.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sol.
I think saka siguro i-remind lang din natin na before yung bago magkaroon ng Iceland resolution, ibang level din yung ginawang gapang ng gobyerno ng Pilipinas. Remember, nag-junket sila sa Europe para kausapin yung mga diplomats, yung mga parliaments. Kasi mismong UN pumunta sila, di ba? So talagang ibang level yung effort na ibinibigay nila dyan para gapangin yung mga 47 member states ng UNHRC para makakuha sila ng mga favorable na boto. So they're doing everything, kahit na maglustay pa sila ng pera ng taong bayan para lang ma-influence din yung mga bansa na member ng Human Rights Council.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ang matindi yung gapang na ginawa nila.
Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna go back then because we're running out of actually we're overtime na pala. But this is important. Just a categorical statement from you, Sol, as the lawyer of Karapatan, because ang sinasabi ni General Usana, they have evidence na NPA yung mga inaresto nila, yung mga napatay nung Sunday. So categorical lang na would you refute this, or what is your answer to this?
That is utterly false. I will refute it. Strongly, kung sasabihin na kasinungalingan yan at gawa-gawa nila yan dahil kilala sila sa pag-iimbento at paglulubid ng istorya. Kung may sinasabi silang ebidensya, ilabas nila sa korte. Ilabas nila yung lahat ng mga witnesses nila, mga confidential informant nila, at gigisahin namin yan on cross-examination kung ilalabas nila. Pero by looking at the narrative nitong mga pulis sa kanilang mga complaint, nitong mga hinuli nitong March 7, ang dami ko nang nakikitang butas eh. And I'm confident madidismiss to lahat.
Okay, so yung bang kaso ni IC, yung dismissal ng kaso niya, does that give you hope?
Of course,
Na-
and also the Negros cases na issued by the same judge yung search warrants. Kasi yung nagpapatunay na ganito ka-irregular kinukuha itong mga search warrants na to, contrary sa sinasabing regularity nito ni General Usana. No? Ito yung magpapatunay, General, na napaka sinungaling nyo, na naglalabas kayo ng mga impormasyon at kung naglulubid kayo ng mga kwento, when obviously you want to attack the activists sa pakanan yung crackdown, at saka dito sa obviously in connection to sa anti-terror law na anyone na makita nyo kaaway ng gobyerno na nag-exercise ng civil and political rights nila.
So you still trust the judiciary?
Well, we don't have any choice but to engage eh. Di ba? Andyan yan eh. So kung kanasuhan ka, wala ka namang choice kundi harapin mo. But I'm saying, hindi naman kami umaasa doon sa four corners ng mga korte. Alam namin na yung pinakamalaking panalo namin, nakukuha namin sa magandang depensa at sama-samang kampanya ng mga tao behind us na manawagan na tama na yung mga ganitong klaseng violations, and to pressure the courts and to pressure the system to stop the killings and to stop the attacks against activists.
And in the same way, Kaloy, do you trust the judiciary to exact accountability on the because you accused the Duterte administration, of course, of being behind all these drug war killings and now these activist killings? Do you trust the judiciary to exact accountability on this administration? Siguro, after they step down. And siguro, if we can, the ICC as well, kung kakayanin ba ng ICC?
Well, the thing is, Barnes, it's quite difficult really because of the way the institutions of governance in this country have been damaged, have been undermined by the Duterte regime from day one. Now we're talking about the media, the courts, the legislature, the executive department. Medyo mahihirapan ka sometimes to say that, I trust the judiciary completely, for instance. Because you know for a fact that there are things that are not going wrong within the judiciary. And they too are subject to all the pressures of politics, all the pressures of our broken political culture. No? But again, to echo what Attorney Sol said, anong choice mo? Andyan sila yung andyan. So what do? You try to make them do their job better. In our case, sa civil society, mga NGOs, we name and shame, we expose, we investigate, so that on the assumption that when we put out a report, we put out something that's credible, the systems of governance, the systems of accountability in this country, and one of them is the judiciary, will kick in, will start to work and try to remedy that. Yan ang hope na gusto namin mangyari. But again, who are we kidding sometimes? We ask ourselves, who are we kidding? I mean, we have a president who does not have any qualms about threatening people, threatening the judiciary, ousting a Supreme Court Chief Justice, for crying out loud. So kaya kami nag-iingay sa labas sa international community, Human Rights Council, ICC. That's why we try to convince the countries, governments, EU, the United States, Canada, Australia, the Western so-called democracies. They cannot keep on just watching the blood flow in the Philippines and say, things are okay in the Philippines naman eh. I mean, the courts are functioning, because clearly something's wrong with this country, and they cannot just they cannot just ignore it. They have to act soon. You know,
But in the meantime,
go ahead.
in the meantime, Attorney Sol, do you fear that there's going to be more bloodshed in the coming
Actually,
weeks and
to
you
be
know
to be honest,
years?
Barnes, we are bracing for impact. Narinig ko lang kanina si General Usana, they have issued 41 search warrants. Ilan pa lang yung na-account namin. And you can just imagine the anxieties I'm going through dun sa mga organizations na kinikater namin, na siniservisyohan namin. So, ganun kadami. And gaya nga ng sabi ko sa'yo, sobrang dali lang naman kuhanin ng mga search warrants na to. So, we expect more violations to happen. And yun nga, we're bracing for impact, sabi ko nga wala naman kaming magagawa, pero the only strength that we have ay yung sama-sama naming panawagan, nakasama kayo at yung mga sino man ang nanonood nito, na itigil na tong mga patayan na to.
Okay, just real quick, again, overtime na tayo. But just real quick, yung sinabi ni General Usana kanina na nangyari sa Puneraria, sa Antipolo.
I would like to clear that,
So, ang sinasabi niya, nanggulo daw yung karapatan. Because hindi naman daw dapat involved yung karapatan sa pag-claim ng mga remains ng mga biktima.
Alam mo, the families of the victims nung extrajudicial killing sa Negros, kasama ng mga paralegals namin, nung ina-assistehan nila yung mga families ng mga victims. Tapos ang kwento nitong PNP and AFP, kami daw yung nagde-detain dun sa kami daw yung nanggugulo. Samantalang andun sila sa Puneraria, they're armed. So paano mangyayaring kami nanggugulo? And in fact, dinetain nila yung mga paralegals namin overnight. Pinodlock nila yung gate ng Puneraria. Kinuha ng military yung susi. Kaya hindi makalabas yung paralegals namin and the families. Kaya dun sila nagwawala na palabasin sila because essentially they are detained already overnight, no? At yung sinasabi nila na may tulong dun sa mayor. Alam mo, we welcome all help, no? Kasi ang laki ng ginastos ng families dito sa pagpapaburol, no? Pero ang tanong namin, bago nag-offer ng financial help itong mayor ng Tanay, the expenses are already paid. Were already paid by the families nung a day before pa lang. So ang gusto mangyari, bawiin yung bayad ng pamilya tapos magbabayad si mayor. Napaka-absurd nun. 'Di ba? Nabayaran na nga bakit gusto niyo pang editin? So I think yung motive nila dito, Barnes, is that kasi clearly the following day dumating yung NCIP, no? Ang involved kasi dito mga dumagat. So ang tingin ko, gustong kontrolin ngayon ng NCIP, no, ng gobyerno through NCIP at ng NTF-ELCAC, yung mga families ng mga victims para makausap nila at mabago nila yung narrative ng pangyayari. Just like what they did to the ITAS. Ganun ang ginawa nila. Tapos papalabasin na naman nila, yung NUPL, hindi naman talaga in-engage ng mga dumagat yan. Gusto nilang baliktarin yung kwentong ganun eh. Alam na namin yung mga ganitong klaseng modus ng AFP at ng PNP. So kaya nila, sinasabi ni General Usana kayo, ano na bang interest namin? Yun ang interest nyo. Gusto nyong kunin yung pamilya, gusto nyo ngayong i-hostage yung pamilya using the dead bodies of their kin na hindi nyo na binigyan ng respeto para properly mag-grieve yung pamilya. So ganyan ang nangyari noong Wednesday and Thursday na may standoff dyan sa Puneraria sa Antipolo.
Siguro last na lang, no, Kaloy, as an outsider looking at these things that are happening pagkatapos na nga na mapatay itong mga activists, sabi ni Sol, legitimate activists, tapos meron parang standoff sa remains. I mean, as a human rights advocate, what does this look like to you?
I mean, this looks to me like a clear attempt by the government to crack down on dissent, to really restrict the democratic space. Matindi kasi yung nila eh. I mean, obviously a lot of this is counterinsurgency. The problem right now is that they're not making any distinctions between activists and armed combatants. That's a key problem that we're facing right now. So, in their zeal, in their motivation nila to finish off the NPA, kung ano-ano na lang yung mga ginagawa without regard to due process. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that the police and the military, they're well within their duties and their rights to do what they think is necessary to protect the republic from criminals and enemies of the state. That's fine. We give it to the state to do that, but it has to be it has to be done in accordance with international law, in accordance with human rights laws, and also in accordance with what is established in the Philippine Constitution. There has to be presumption of innocence. But a lot of this are being thrown out the window by these actions by the government, and that is scary. That is very, very distressing for a people like us, for Filipinos who fought the dictatorship for decades, for us who are, for a people who are still trying to, to fine-tune democracy. That is very, very disappointing. Itong ginagawa ng gobyerno.
All right. I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Carlos Conde of the Human Rights Watch and Attorney Sol Taule, Legal Counsel of Karapatan. That's all the
Thank
time
you,
we have.
Barn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barn.
Thank you, Kaloy. Thank you, Kaloy.
So, good luck.
That's all the
Thank
time
you.
that we
Thank you,
have
Kaloy.
for this week. To those who tuned in, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Viewpoint. Do catch us live here on Now You Know's Facebook page, Twitter, and YouTube channel every Saturday at 6 in the evening. Again, my name is Barnaby Lo. This is Viewpoint. Now You Know.